Hey, what's up guys? It's Jim with Digital Asset today. So you might have seen this video from Vice talking about Vitalik and Ethereum, and you're kind of like, what's going on here? What is Ethereum? What's happening with this? Where is it going? Is it worth money now? Is it like Bitcoin? How's it different? Stick around, I'm going to explain a lot of that and where the price is going. If you want to see more videos like this, just hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be making videos every day talking about cryptocurrency. Okay, so you've learned a little bit about Vitalik in this video, and I'll provide a link in the description if you found this through my channel. So what's the deal with Vitalik? Basically, he's a young kid. He's a super genius. He's a little bit eccentric, right? He's sort of definitely the stereotype of sort of the kid that's spent a lot of time on the computer. And what's the deal with Ethereum? So Ethereum has seen absolute crazy exponential growth. I mean, I can still remember when Ethereum was, declining, and everybody was really excited for the project, but nobody knew what the future had in store for it. And it's seen crazy price action with an earlier peak last summer of about $400 before consolidating throughout the year and then eventually peaking at about $1,400 in January. And totally crazy. Since then, price has sort of has been pegged to Bitcoin. And in the cryptocurrency space, Bitcoin is sort of like the king, right? Bitcoin, or Big Daddy Bitcoin, as I like to think of him. But Ethereum is sort of like the queen. And Ethereum has a lot of interesting speculative things going on. Basically, Ethereum is trying to do a lot more than Bitcoin. If Bitcoin is trying to decentralize currency or store of value, Ethereum is trying to decentralize almost everything. And decentralization just means that you don't need a centralized organization to control something. We're actually decentralizing it, and there's no, it's a project with no leader. It is a function without an actor. Nobody's in charge, right? That kind of thing. And I like to think of Ethereum as the queen because Ethereum has debatably a lot more going on for it. In fact, some people think that Ethereum will someday overtake Bitcoin. But we'll see because it's trying to do so much that there's actually a lot of cause for concern, and it's a huge, nobody's done this before. There's no precedence for this, and the leader is 24-year-old Vitalik Buterin. Pretty crazy. There's a really good interview with Vitalik on this podcast called Unchained. That's with Laura Shin. I think she's getting her chops as an interviewer, but she definitely gets big names on her show, so worth checking out. And I want to bring up CryptoKitties, right? If you guys haven't heard, this is a collectible item that was basically put on the blockchain, and it was sort of the first time that we actually saw Ethereum being used for something besides ICOs, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So what is the Ethereum project? Ethereum is the actual project. It's open source. Vitalik is sort of the leader, but he is trying to make steps so that if he's gone, the project will continue. And trust me, if he's gone, the project will continue. It has a huge following. There's lots and lots of developers working on Ethereum. Ether is actually the currency's name. So if you say, I'm going to send somebody 30 Ether, that would be the correct way of saying that. But basically, it's on the blockchain. It's on blockchain, similar to Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin is trying to decentralize money, right, Ethereum is trying to decentralize all of the stuff, which is pretty crazy, and it's a huge goal. And it's doing that through a mechanism known as a smart contract. So basically, this is code that will execute based off of some sort of parameter. So basically, the idea is that you don't have somebody that needs to okay something. It's just going to execute based on the code, which is a pretty crazy notion until we think of a real-world application. So a project that's being built on Ethereum. Here's an example. Eventus, right? So when people buy tickets for events and maybe they can't go and they try and resell it, and you have these centralized organizations that handle this problem, right? You have like StubHub and Ticketmaster that will buy the tickets and then they resell it, but then there's always people scalping, and then you have people creating and selling fake tickets at the event, right? It's actually a huge problem, and this is a project that's trying to tackle that by putting the ticketing system on the blockchain. So we would actually decentralize this, and we wouldn't need Ticketmaster or StubHub, for instance. So these projects are potentially going to be huge, huge disruptors, and this is just one little project that's being built on Ethereum. So pretty crazy. And these projects are built on top of Ethereum using what's called the ERC20 protocol. And that might sound kind of confusing, but it's just the name within the with the community. And this is arguably the only thing that Ethereum has really been able to do, besides CryptoKitties, is create tokenization. So basically, you can build a project on top of Ethereum, like Eventus. You can actually look up, Eventus has its own, I don't think it's up, oh, wait, is it up here? No. But Eventus has its own ticker and its own token. You can buy this token, right? It has its own market cap, it's seen its own price action, etc. And this is all built on top of Ethereum. So my point is that there's a lot of potential third parties that have a lot to gain through Ethereum. And we're calling these decentralized applications, right? So basically think of, in the video Vitalik references BitTorrent, right, which is sort of decentralizing file downloading, right? There's no central server that you're downloading from. You're actually downloading little bits of each part of the file from several different people, which raises a lot of concerns like, oh, how are you downloading this? You're not downloading this from one place, so we don't know who to bust, right? It's a big problem with the law, and of course, media companies have been freaking out ever since trying to deal with this. But anyway, these decentralized applications are launched in what's called an initial coin offering, or an ICO. You might have heard of ICOs. Basically, it's like an initial public offering, right? But it's actually done on the blockchain, or in this instance, by issuing an ERC20 token on top of Ethereum. So when you hear about ICOs, they are typically done on top of Ethereum, although that is not always true. That's the most popular way of doing it, though. And with more capability, Ethereum is trying to do so much more than Bitcoin, arguably. And with that capability comes some security vulnerabilities. So back in 2016, a really important event in Ethereum's history happened, in which what was called the DAO was launched. And the DAO was a decentralized autonomous organization. So this is one of the main use cases for Ethereum. And the DAO was launched, and it was instantly hacked. And I don't know if we can actually see that on the chart. We'll come back to that. And it was a really crazy time for Ethereum, and sort of desperate times called for desperate measures. And the team that was working on Ethereum decided to fork the code. And basically what you need to know is literally you're splitting they literally took a copy, basically, of the blockchain, cut and pasted, and created a new chain. This is what's known as a hard fork. But the interesting thing about this is that a lot of people didn't like this idea, and people actually sort of picked up the old chain and kept developing on it. And it has now become its own project known as Ethereum Classic. So because of the DAO hack, we now have two Ethereums. But for the most part, Ethereum Classic has a much less vibrant community. And as far as I know, I don't know of any projects that are actually being built on top of Ethereum Classic, but it does have a lot of investor interest because there's sort of this idea that, Vitalik is sort of like the kingpin of Ethereum, and that we believe that, code is God, right? This is the whole point of Ethereum that, was sort of missed on the Ethereum fork. So there's actually people that are working on this, and it's like it's number, what was it, 16? Number 16 in terms of market cap. So it's no joke. People are very interested in this. So Ethereum still works using proof of work like Bitcoin, meaning you basically just need raw computing power to secure the network, which means people, with computers are basically running functions to actually send and receive Ether, which is, somebody basically needs to keep the lights on, right? Somebody needs to make sure this stuff works. But Vitalik has always been slightly critical of proof of work because it's kind of wasteful, right? You're basically just, you need electricity to run all this computing power. And that's why eventually Ethereum is going to be moving to proof of stake. However, nobody has really figured out proof of stake yet. This has been, I'm not the channel to talk about this type of technical stuff. If you want to learn more about this, you can look this up. But just know that Ethereum has huge scaling issues, and even Vitalik has said in interviews that Ethereum isn't ready to do what all of these ERC20 token projects are trying to do. I mean, stuff like Avantis can't really work yet because Ethereum it doesn't have the scale yet. So, Ethereum has the potential to do a lot of things, but it is uncertain, right? So that's why there is a lot of speculation and a lot of people that are debating about the value of Ethereum, which is why the price has moved around in such a crazy manner. So let's talk about price. So price peaked in January of 2018, and since then has basically followed Bitcoin. But in quarter two, we're seeing a nice little uptick, and again, that's actually following Bitcoin. So there's lots of talks about, so I'm going to switch over to this article here by Josh Olszewicz, and he's great. You guys should follow him. He has a Twitter and a YouTube account, and he writes for Brave New Coin. He releases these articles every once in a while. These are great updates to check out. They look a little bit technical, but if you get through them, you're going to be in much better shape. So let's run through it for a little bit. Basically, the theme of the article is that price action is going up despite the fact that there's some regulatory concerns, and that the U.S. government hasn't really seen a decentralized project like this, and they don't know how to classify it. So is Ethereum a security? Are all of these tokens that are being built on top of Ethereum, are they considered securities? Which basically means that they would be under scrutiny by the SEC. So that's a big deal, meaning that they would be subject to the same type of laws that a stock or a commodity would be potentially. And actually, sorry, I should say that the CFTC actually regulates commodities, so that's a separate thing. And the CFTC has also mentioned that they believe Bitcoin is a commodity. So we're not really sure. The government doesn't really know what's going on. If you watch these hearings, it's really obvious that the government doesn't really know what to do with this stuff yet. But they don't want to miss the boat, and they don't want to squash technology with regulation, but they just don't really know how to proceed. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, which I think had a lot to do with this downturn. There's just no precedence for this kind of stuff. But this year we are seeing lots of ICOs. Well, at least maybe not as many. Let's look at. Let's check it out. Okay, so we've talked about ICOs. The number of ICOs in 2016 was less than 50. Man, look at these old guys. Oh, Gollum, what an oldie but a goodie. Lisk, there was the DAO. back when Neo was Ant shares, all these stuff raised millions of dollars, which was a big deal in 2016. And then in 2017, we would call that the year of the ICO. It was a big deal. We had over 200 ICOs, and they're now reaching, hundreds of millions of dollars. Filecoin being a good example, raising more than 250 million, based on lots and lots of different sectors. However, we're seeing more and more money come into ICOs. So we have about 200 already, and we haven't even, we're in quarter one. So there's a ton of ICOs, and one outlier might stick out is that Telegram, which is a messaging app that is supposedly encrypted and private, which is why a lot of people that use cryptocurrency use it, made their own ICO, and it's giant. It's $1.7 billion, which has just totally never happened. So ICOs are still happening, but with the regulatory concern, a lot of them are going private, or they're starting to do what are called airdrops, which is when they just fork from another coin and drop coins on that project. That's a whole another question, whole another thing we could talk about. But let's wrap up this video here in a minute. Vitalik has actually proposed that ICOs be done differently, because there's an issue with ICOs in that you're giving a team of developers, you're giving 12 computer nerds millions of dollars. And then it's just well, why are we even making this project? We have millions of dollars, right? So there's been lots of scams. There's been lots of projects that just haven't worked out, and that kind of thing. So it's important to do your research if you ever want to invest into an ICO. Again, this is not investment advice or not financial advice. But I think we're going to see a growing trend this year, and that more and more private money is going to be investing in these projects, and the public necessarily won't be getting in on this, because a lot of projects are afraid that they're going to be under scrutiny from the SEC. But, okay, so what does that mean for Ethereum? If we look at Ethereum compared to Bitcoin, maybe eventually, if we look at Ethereum compared to Bitcoin, I like to use the Ichimoku cloud to take a look at this stuff, and I'm going to log scale. But last time I actually made a video about this, about how last time we saw this cross, and this is a Kijun crossing the Tenken. And if you want to learn more about the Ichimoku system, I'm going to be making more videos, so hit subscribe and follow me, and I'll be discussing this stuff. We saw a giant raise in Ethereum over Bitcoin. And then it happened again early this year, and that was, well, it was December until maybe February, or until January. And this has correlated strongly with altcoins going nuts. And now we're seeing, after a long die-off, right, where Bitcoin was taking back its dominance, again, this is Bitcoin, right? So this is Ethereum in the price of Bitcoin. Ethereum traded against Bitcoin. And so the price of Ethereum was going down compared to Bitcoin, and now we're seeing the price of Ethereum going up compared to Bitcoin. So if this keeps up and we see another cross this is the 1-day chart, so each bar is 1 day. If we see this cross again, we could be in the midst of another huge altcoin rush. And who knows? Some people even still talk about the flippening, in which they think Ethereum will be worth more than Bitcoin, right? And so Ethereum would be the dominant cryptocurrency. I don't think that's likely, personally, anytime soon. But if you want to take a little quick snapshot, right? Where are we at now? Ethereum is about 15% of the total cryptocurrency market, compared to about 40% for Bitcoin. Which is interesting, because Bitcoin used to be, everything in the market, and now we're seeing the market has spread out quite a bit in cryptocurrency, right? Ethereum is still a large player, but others are about 25%. So the market has spread out a little bit. Where does that leave Ethereum? So Ethereum, in my opinion, is a strong contender. It has one of the strongest communities. It's got so many developers working for it. There's so many projects built on top of it. It has the first mover advantage on all this stuff. But it's still highly speculative, right? If Bitcoin is a calculator, then Ethereum is kind of like a laptop, right? You can do so much more with it, but there's so much more that can go wrong with it, right? If you think about a calculator, I mean, you can't really hack a calculator and make anything go wrong, but you can on a laptop, right? So there's more to go wrong. It has bigger potential, but has much bigger problems and much more that it needs to tackle in order to become a successful project. And Ethereum's founder Vitalik has said himself that there's a lot of work to be done, and that all these projects are frankly a little bit early, right? So it's sort of like sit back and let's let the developers work for a little bit. Okay, so that was my analysis of Ethereum. If you want to be alerted anytime that I make one of these videos, make sure you hit the bell. That will give you an alert right away. And hit subscribe, like this video if you found it really useful. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Feel free to ask questions. I have a very small audience, so anybody that asks any questions, I'll probably just make a video about it. That's it for now, and I'll talk to you another time.